classroom, I have posted the Nearpod. So if we could all jump into the Nearpod, that would be fantastic. All right, so we should be seeing 2i9v6, 2i9v6 as our code. And where we last left off, we were discussing the effects, all right, with regards to inflation and the effects with regards to deflation. And you've obviously got a deflation exercise to work on. And you've also got some inflation material, the hyperinflation. That would be a useful one to work your way through. Okay, and if you have questions when you go through that, please do ask. That would be quite significant. So just to remind ourselves about the RUCupid, go back a slide here. All right, so deflation, right, which we recognize as being negative inflation in a sense, right? So it is a decrease, an actual decrease in the price level. Right? RUCupid talks about redistributive effects, very similar to what you would have had with inflation, but kind of in reverse in a way, right? Because we see those asset prices actually falling. So those who have a lot of their income in assets are going to see a redistribution of their wealth. As before, an increase in uncertainty, because it's the reverse of what you had with inflation. So people might choose now to put off their spending, not because they're worried about the prices rising, but because they're thinking that the prices are going to fall even further in the future. So there's going to be less consumption deferred. There's going to be less investment deferred, all of those sorts of things, because they're worried about what will happen, what the future will be. There's no certainty with regards to prices with regards to that. You will expect to see some unemployment occur because of the same reasons. This is all happening. So there will be people who will lose their jobs because of the fact that there is then less consumption occurring, in particular. Policy ineffectiveness. It's difficult to combat deflation. You're going to be focusing on perhaps expansionary fiscal policies at that point, but there's only so much that you can do with regards to economic policy in this regard in order to fix deflation occurring. So expansionary fiscal policies potentially, and Japan as a country is a good case study of attempting to fix deflation through expansionary fiscal policy. And you will have noticed that it really has not been particularly successful at all. Right? In fact, they're a very good case study for policy ineffectiveness, right, with regards to deflation. And so monetary policy, so then you've got expansionary monetary policy. So what is that? That's going to be decreasing interest rates. Well, you can only decrease interest rates to a certain point, you know, and I know in theory we've got negative interest rates for some countries around the world, but realistically, the closer you get to zero, the less effective that particular policy is going to be. You are, again, because of all of this happening, you're going to see an inefficient resource allocation, and the levels of debt, you might assume, again, it's all part of the theory, should then start to increase as well. So RUCupid is a good way, a good mnemonic for remembering those deflationary costs. Now, remembering our monetary policy idea, we had the idea of it manipulating interest rates, manipulating the money supply in order to affect aggregate demand. And because we're affecting aggregate demand, we're therefore affecting inflation, output, and employment. So just a quick review. What was monetary policy again? There you go. Wait, Fatima, let's see. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're thinking here about using, so the tool is the money supply and the tool is interest rates that causes an effect on demand, on the demand side of the economy. But yes, you're right, they are controlling the money supply. Yes, well done, Joel. Absolutely right. Yes, good, Max. Then you might want to add why they're doing it. What is the purpose of it? Yes, good. To change price levels. Yeah, okay. It's about influencing demand, which then influences the price levels. It can also be influencing other macroeconomic objectives. So, say, for example, unemployment would be a possibility in economic growth. So, it's whatever their macroeconomic objective is. Good. Well done, Nisa. Good. We're now, yes, indeed. Yes, Doan, that's right. Yes, Serena, that's absolutely right. In order to. So you'd add a little bit there of in order to. Yeah, it's not necessarily about the demand of money, Kendrick. But yes, definitely supply of money, right? The influence on the interest rates as well. Yes, about promoting sustainable economic growth and or other economic objectives. Good. Managing their money supply, yes. Influencing, yes, well done. Absolutely, Sharif. Yes, that one. All right, have a go, Kendrick. Yeah, and it's the supply of money, but yes, good. The work comes in. Okay. Right, so manipulation of interest rates and money supply to affect aggregate demand in order to meet macroeconomic objectives. Good. All right, well done, team. You're doing this well. All right, monetary policy, a key tool, particularly at the moment, right? Obviously, with the world sort of basically on fire, economically speaking, we need as many hands as we can, as many tools as we can in order to try and fix what's going on. Now, if we have demand pull inflation, right, we're wanting to see a reduction in the excess demand in the system. So we're going to have deflationary policy, so potentially increasing taxes, lowering government spending, and or raising interest rates and reducing the money supply. Now, we have to be careful. We need to be conscious of the fact that these are two different policies. So fiscal policy, monetary policy, they can both be contractionary, or you might have monetary policy that's contractionary and fiscal policy that's expansionary. And then, you know, you've got to try and weigh up the effects of each aspect of those particular policies. Right? Also looking at if they are both happening, is that too heavy-handed a solution? Right? You know, it's the equivalent of putting your foot on the brake in the car or putting your foot on the brake and hauling on the handbrake. Right? Both feet on the brakes and hauling on the handbrake. Right? You will stop. You'll probably just stop a whole lot quicker than you were kind of thinking. So reducing the level of aggregate demand, the excess level of demand, right? Increasing taxes, decreasing spending, potentially decreasing aggregate demand through that, right? Or maybe increasing aggregate supply, or sorry, decreasing aggregate supply if it's goods and services tax. Fill in the gaps. Away you go. work, team. Got a couple more. Works, still waiting on a couple. Okay. That's good results. Well done, team. All right. So, if we're wanting to reduce the excess aggregate demand in the economy, then a deflationary policy, a contractionary policy is appropriate. So from a fiscal point of view, we're thinking about increasing taxes, lowering government spending. From a monetary point of view, we are considering raising interest rates and possibly reducing the money supply. What about if it's cost push inflation? If it's caused by aggregate supply, then the problem is about rising costs. And that's that idea that we had about stagflation, the period of time in the late 1970s, okay? So in this case, maybe those demand side policies aren't going to work, right? Because it's cost push inflation. So the point being here is when you are evaluating inflation and inflation policies, it's about bringing up alternatives. It's about discussing the effectiveness of particular policies. So if it's about, is contractionary fiscal policy always effective at reducing inflation? Lots that you can do with that, but an important part of it is recognizing that maybe the inflation isn't caused by demand at all. Maybe inflation is instead caused by cost push, by aggregate supply. So therefore, because the problem is rising costs, we might suggest that something along the supply side is more relevant in that, trying to solve the supply side problems, right, might be more relevant. So how, therefore, could you solve cost push inflation? What would you have to do? Have a guess. It's about the supply side of the economy, aggregate supply. What are you going to have to do to try and encourage aggregate supply? Maybe. But is that going to actually affect the costs involved? That's possible. Oh, there we go, Ariane. You're actually thinking along the right trains there. Well done. Remember, it's about costs, so it's about the supply. Oh, good work, Joel. Yeah, bit bullet pointy, but good work. Wait for some more ideas. Yeah, Max, you're onto something there, but we need to be a little bit more specific with regards to tax and what we're meaning by tax, and even interest rates. We might be need to be a bit more specific about how we think that is going to help in this scenario. Pretty much every drawer or cupboard I open, there's more Lego bits inside it. Right, how are we going? Still waiting on some answers? What else could you do? What could you do? Oh, good work, Arena. Yes, indeed, you could do. Absolutely. Yeah, good work, Darwin. Thinking specifically about the types of taxes you might think about there, but yes, it's definitely possible. Good work, Ian, absolutely. Yeah, we've added an etc. at the end of our answer, by the way. All right, just, I want to try and avoid etceteras that suggest there's more information that you have that you're not then sharing. All right, government could reduce costs. Yes, okay. That would be a possible solution. Well done. Okay, yeah, that might work. But remember, because we're talking about supply, we need to be a little bit careful that we don't make the situation actually worse. So if aggregate supply is decreasing, and then we put in place policies that are going to cause aggregate demand to decrease as well, then we're actually potentially going to make the problem worse in the sense that we will end up with exactly what happened in the 70s, where you've got inflation and decrease in employment. So we do have to be careful potentially with that. All right, good efforts, good thinking. So if it is more monetary, all right, so if we're thinking about the amount of money that's available, the amount of credit that is available, right? If there is an excess of growth of the money supply, so if there's too much money floating around in the economy, then what we say is that we're going to see more inflation, because we saw that the other week with that formula, the MV equals PT formula, where we're going to see increase in money supply multiplied by the velocity of circulation equaling an increase in the price level, potentially. So if that's the case, then what we should be thinking about is increasing the money supply potentially, but only increasing it at the same amount as the real increase in national output, right? So if we just do this very quickly here we go. Oh, there it is. All right. So if, where's my highlighter? All right. So if we have M increasing here, then what we want to do is we want this overall formula equation to equal the same level as that formula increasing. And if that was to happen, then yes, although increases in money supply were happening, it would not be inflationary, because your real output level would be increasing as well. Right? The problem becomes when your real output isn't increasing, therefore only the price level is increasing. That's when it becomes inflationary. All right. So what are the problems if we're using demand-sided deflationary policies? Well, you're probably very familiar with all of these. In fact, I feel a bit silly talking to you about them, because these are ones that you see happening all the time, everywhere around the world. If we are proposing higher taxes, increase in tax and less government spending, for a start, that's going to be enormously politically unpopular. Right? We can see that. We've seen that. We've got the evidence, the actual real-life evidence from countries around the world where that has happened. We've also will note the inequality with regards to that, particularly if you're reducing government spending. I mean, where are they going to cut the spending? Whose taxes are they going to raise? So there's going to be some groups who will be affected more than others. So there will be equity or equality issues that are tied to that particular decision. Also thinking about those higher interest rates from a monetary policy point of view. Well, higher interest rates are going to potentially harm people who are borrowing money. They're going to end up having to pay more. And who are those people? Well, some of them are the businesses borrowing money for investment. So therefore, that's going to lead to a future of less investment or more costly investment. Also, homeowners who may be struggling with their mortgages. All of a sudden, interest rates rise, and now their house becomes less affordable to live in than it previously was. Now, generally speaking, these policies are going to actually reduce national output. So therefore, any deflationary policy is going to, as we said before, cause unemployment. So it's that idea that there's the trade-off between inflation and unemployment. And we've said unemployment is evil, we've said inflation is evil. So we're realistically now juggling with these two ideas and trying to figure out what sorts of levels are going to be acceptable, right, to us. Because if we can't target both, we're going to need to work out what level of unemployment is socially acceptable, or work out what level of inflation is socially acceptable, because you can't have it both ways, all right? So what is the problems? Ooh, apologies for the writing there. What is the problem with demand-side solutions for inflation that we've just gone through? Quick review. Way you go.
How long are you? Mom said, how long are you going to be?
I'm still in my lesson, so a little bit.
Okay.
All right, so let's see here. Higher taxes, less government spending, higher interest rates, reducing national output. Yes, okay, good. Causing some unemployment, well done. Politically unpopular, that's a good point. All right, groups affected worse than others, equality issues, equity, higher, yes, well done. Yep, absolutely, yes. And the unemployment can be a real problem. If unemployment is the problem, one of the big problems to start with, and then you're choosing now as a policy change to affect inflation, then you're going to cause some real problems with regards to the level of unemployment. Yeah, absolutely right, Anne. It is difficult to actually implement policies if they are politically unpopular. It may end up with, as we've seen, right, many examples around the world where you're implementing a policy that is of benefit to the economy, but it's politically unpopular, so therefore people get voted out with regards to that. Higher taxes, yes, okay. Right. Yes, well done, Arena, well done. Yes, fantastic. Kendrick, yes. Okay, well done, Kendrick. All right. Why do we then therefore need to have independence in our central banking system? So those central banks, the reserve banks, they should be independent. All right. The goal by the government is to have a low and stable inflation rate. So therefore, we want our central banks to be free from political pressure. And you can see this, again, there might be examples that you know of in the real world, and particularly if you are considering the US, the previous administration of the US, when the previous person, Muppet, who was president, who decided that he would personally try and put pressure on the central bank with regards to what they were wanting to happen. So if the central bank is independent, therefore it's not going to matter what the political pressures are, they're just going to focus on their particular job. Right? However, if it's a government that's concerned about the politicalness of the job that they have to do, it's an election year, they're worried about getting re-elected, if they have power over the central bank with regards to monetary policy, then they could, what is it, the hip-hop expression, make it rain, right? They could actually allow there to be a big windfall for all sorts of different people because they're in power, right? But if their central bank is independent, then it has its goal. Its goal is, like the government's goal, to maintain a low and stable inflation rate. And therefore, whatever it needs to do, that's what it does. Often there will be a target rate of inflation. So you're going to be looking at something that's considered socially acceptable, some sort of range. So in New Zealand, it is 1 to 3% on average over the medium quarter, over the medium term, which is just vague enough that if they fall outside of it, they're not in too much trouble. Right? But it does give them a target and a justification for the policies that they enact. Now, because they're independent, it does mean that even if what they are doing is politically unpopular, they still do it. Right? Whereas if they were linked quite strongly to the government, chances are the right policies may not happen. Right? In fact, if in a New Zealand sense, right, the governor of the Reserve Bank can actually be fired if they don't meet their target rate. Right? Now, of course, it's a little bit vague, so they're probably not likely to fire them, but it is possible. And similarly in America, with each new president, they tend to select a governor of the Reserve Bank who, follows their particular philosophy, right, about economics, or their particular philosophy with regards to whether there should be a low and stable inflation rate or not, and what that might be. All right. Now I'm going to skip past that because I think that's fairly straightforward. Right, a little bit here, illustrations, okay? So here we've got this one here, which is the target range. This should be New Zealand, I think, this one. Any case, right? So this is the 2 to 3% target range with regards to inflation. There it is. No, this is the US, 2 to 3%. All right, and this is the impact of inflation occurring here. This one here looks to be New Zealand. Yeah, this is New Zealand here. So this is what happened. Remember I talked about the wage price spiral that occurred with regards to the oil shock, right, in the late 70s. Then the New Zealand government attempted to control prices. So it attempted to say, prices not going to increase. So there was a dramatic decrease. And so that worked for a little bit. But then eventually they had to say, okay, we'll let prices do whatever it is that they wanted them to do. So back up they went. Right? And that just caused even more uncertainty and more issues within the market. Then the New Zealand government decided to introduce GST. Right? So up until that point, we didn't have goods and services tax. Then goods and services tax was introduced. Now, they did introduce here some monetary policy controls. They introduced what's called the Reserve Bank Act, 1989. That's how long it took. Right? And that was about targeting inflation and how they were going to do it, and using the CPI and what the CPI was made of, and what the rules and regulations for the Reserve Bank were going to be, who did they report to, all of that was set up in this law. But that's 1989. So up until this point, a lot of this monetary policy was actually the government. Right? The government personally telling the Reserve Bank, you must do this. Right? Then it made, here in New Zealand, 1989, it made the Reserve Bank independent. And in case you're wondering, that's one of the first countries in the world to actually do that. Right? Then they set their inflation targets. They set them a little bit low to start with, and then they gradually widened it. So they originally had it as 0 to 3%. Right? Then they widened it to 1 to 3%, with the target obviously being in the middle of that range. Right? Up here we have US consumer prices here over time, and the US Fed has an official target rate of 2%. Right? So this is showing you that between here and here, these are the periods of time where they are above the target. These are the periods where they're below the target. These are the periods where they're approaching 0 here. So you've got to make an assumption here that this is getting a little bit concerning for the Fed at this particular point. You can also look at the time period that we're talking about, all right, and recognise that that's a period of phenomenal growth in the UK and the US in particular. There's in the actual slides, you'll find some actual articles there, and obviously a video, right, with regards to inflation targeting, you know, if you're wanting a little bit more background with regards to that. Now, here's an example of possible questions that could happen. Now, yeah, admittedly, it's more likely that they're going to change it ever so slightly, and I'll mention that in a second. Evaluate the effectiveness of demand-side policies in reducing inflation. All right, so that would be in the old exam model a 15-mark question, and is still likely to be a 15-mark question. They may change it slightly. Okay, this is what the economics teachers have been discussing online in the online forums as to how these new papers are going to actually look. Because even though we've got exemplars, we're still not 100% clear as to what the overall questions will end up being. You will get a question that looks remarkably like that, okay? However, it might be less general, okay, sorry, less specific, all right, is one option, or the other option is about a comparison. So effectiveness in reducing inflation, or the effectiveness with regards to economic growth, or about that conflict between policies that impact on growth versus the policies that impact on inflation, or the policies that impact on employment versus the policies that impact on inflation. So that's more likely what you will be looking at, some sort of combination question, right, with regards to your evaluating. All right, if I jump back to here, all right, now if I can get that clip. Right, so I can see the conversations there. Now, you ladies and gentlemen have done a lot, even just within that short space in time. The evaluating of these policies is significant, and it's really important. If you haven't yet done, and there's about 4 of you who haven't yet done your planning for your IAC2, putting that in, please do that so I can give you the feedback on that and give you the green light, go ahead and do it. Right? Yes, it will be due officially at the end of term. Right? If you need longer than that, let me know. Right? But if you need longer than that, then take longer than that. But as I said to you, it's probably easier for you to get it done before the summer break, when you have less things to consider, like EEs and various other things. Right? Then you don't have to worry about it. So work on that. If I've given you the green light, and that will happen today on your planning, then go, just start work on that. All right, get some traction going on the IA commentary. The other thing, what was it? The other thing that I was wanting to say. Yeah, if you haven't yet gone through the hyperinflation and the deflation material, please do that. If you haven't yet finished the deflation practice question, please do that. Have a go at all of these things. I know it takes time and you've got limited amounts of time, but where you've got a pocket or a window of time, like say now, have a go, see what you can get done. So we're going to finish here for today. And what I would like you to do is to work on, if you haven't done the commentary planning, do that. I will be going through the commentary planning, and I will be giving you some feedback on that. And so if you get the feedback, please feel free to either ask me further questions about your feedback or start work on it. So earlier you do, the better. And obviously the hyperinflation, the deflation, and the deflation practice question, if you can work your way through those as well. Are there any particular questions?
Do you think we can watch Charlie the Chocolate Factory?
On the TV?
Yeah.
Maybe we can
No,
have a look.
it's on Netflix.
Yeah, we can have a look. All right. Okay, so any particular questions? We all know what to do. Excellent. All right. Otherwise, as we'd say in the land of my birth, hey Corneta, which means goodbye for now. And remember, always remember, economics rocks.
Yay.
All right. Have a fun.
Thank you, Mr. David.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
I'll upload the recording and when it's all processed as well. See?
Mr. Davis, the feedback that you gave just quickly came to me,
Yes.
and before, because it's the website that I used
Hmm.
are the same for, like, the website is the same for all of the three links.
is.
I thought it had really good, like, but as you said, that doesn't look like a news article. So should I change these three completely? Do you want me to?
Oh no. The very first one that you did was the one that I was suggesting was the best one.
Yeah.
And so therefore I would be recommending that you push forward with that.
Yeah,
did
I also
think
liked
that-
it the most.
Yeah.
I also liked it the most. Yeah.
Yeah. I did think that it might be worth your time, working out, like, copy and paste sort of the title or whatever you want to do, but working out if there is a news article that gives that same information.
Okay.
Because I'm not 100% clear on that website as to whether it is a news website or whether it is more just a blog-based news.
Understood.
Which is difficult to sort of figure out at this.
So, but that has green light to do, right?
Yes,
one.
absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, so if I find it, then I will put it. Should I still let you know about it, or I can just continue with it?
You can just keep going.
Okay, and if I don't, I'll just continue with this.
I mean, hold on. I'll just push this button here.